In Scotland, the village, you know that something is successful 10 years on when you don't recognise more than half the people in the room. And that's certainly the case today. The growth of the Bidds family has been exponential. It's been enormous, and not just in numerical terms. It's the growth of the Bidds family reaching out into parts of the public sector we never really imagined would be part of the family, parts of the private sector, parts of the social economy, across the whole of, actually, the SCDI membership. I'll say a word or two about SCDI as well in a mo, just by way of context and where Bidds fits in the general economic scene. But another indicator, another metric for success in terms of the growth of Bidds is that you know when you get an audience like this and you get a multilingual panel like that. So as well as Ian's version of English, then we get Eva from Sweden, Tina auf Deutsch, and even Gary talking in Aberdonian. So not a bad multilingual panel to kick the day off with. And to give us an idea of the stretch and the reach of the Bidds extended family around the world. And to put into context your own work, when you're at the chalk face dealing with the operational side, understanding and appreciating that there are people all over the world organising, getting into partnership, developing Bidds, running Bidds, looking at new ideas, running initiatives, projects, and the rest. And so there's not so much a task to reinvent wheels, it's much more a task of learning from each other, and that's what this event is surely all about. Since being advisor to Bidds and a number of other things at the time, I've moved on to, as Keith was saying, the Scottish Council for Development and Industry. I know there are 2 or 3 of our members in the audience. But I think it would be useful just to say a word or two about SCDI and where we fit and why I'm still interested and why SCDI as an organisation are interested in Bidds, the Bidds mechanism and the Bidds movement as well. So SCDI, the Sunday name, the Scottish Council for Development and Industry, it's a little older than Bidds, a little older than 10 years. It was first created in 1931 in the depth of recession, and it's an economic body which gives advice then to the government of the day and now to the governments of the day. And we give them advice on the resilience and the robustness of the economy. And we make interventions into the economy. We've made a few fairly significant interventions over the years, bringing the oil and gas sector together for the first time in the early 70s, bringing the electronics industry to Scotland in the decade after, bringing the concept of industrial parks, industrial estates. Hillington Industrial Estate on the edge of Glasgow was an SCDI concept, which has obviously developed into a mass movement of the way we organise ourselves structurally across industry and commerce. And so we've made a number of significant interventions, and the latest being bringing the 7 cities together, this city being the 7th. So the Scottish Cities Alliance, which is hosted by SCDI, has a huge role to play in infrastructure, which is one of our areas of interest, which I'll say a word about as well. And we, as I say, we give advice to the government. So we had, for the first time since devolution, hard to believe that it was the first time since devolution, but the First Minister from the Scottish Government, the Secretary of State from the UK Government on the same platform at our event just a couple of weeks ago. And trying to get them to talk a common economic language, to do the thing which you do daily, day in and day out, and that's that issue of partnership. So we give advice to them. Our latest publication, From Fragile to Agile, is a blueprint for the Scottish economy, and it focuses on the big challenges of Scotland's economy. You know, if we didn't have the big infrastructure projects underway, the Forth Crossing, the Raith Interchange on the M74, the Aberdeen Bypass, the electrification of the rail network in central Scotland, if we didn't have those big capital projects going, Scotland technically would be in recession. And so there's a huge challenge to be had, and bids are one of the key local mechanisms to meeting those challenges. So there are three key deficits of the Scottish economy which we spend our days analysing and bringing forward solutions on. So one is, and the key one, productivity. We are about, depending on which metrics you take, between 20 and 30% less productive than our competitors and colleagues in other parts of Europe and certainly across the OECD. And it was interesting to see Ian's slide up there talking about how much more productive the process of becoming a bid is now than it was at the start, cutting that time from 24 months to 12 months. So being able to get from policy aim to practice and delivery in half the time that it used to take when that legislation was first passed. And it's issues like that that you deal with, both in terms of your mechanism and in terms of the way you go about your business. The second big challenge is innovation. In Scotland, we are 17 out of 32 in OECD competitor terms in the Innovation League. We need a huge amount more innovation, particularly in the private sector, but again, and it's the space that you operate in, it's that interface between the public sector and the private sector together. If we can drive more innovation through that space, then we can improve productivity levels. If we can improve productivity levels, then we can grow the economy and put it on a much more stable and agile footing. And then the third aspect, the third big deficit in the economy in Scotland is our lack of internationalisation. Roughly 50% of our total export effort is driven by around 50 companies, which clearly is unsustainably low and narrow base for growing an economy like Scotland's. What we are hopeful of in terms of the bids movement and in terms of a number of the members of bids is to grow that internationalisation effort and to understand and appreciate how you do that export thing. How do you take that skill and the talent and the products and the services which you provide and your members provide, and how do you internationalise them and either trade out the way or lever in investment in the way. And if we can achieve even small gains with any of those three big challenges, then you will continue to play an enormous part in growing the Scottish economy. And it's in that big economic context that you don't often see when you're working day to day in the operational side of bids. And that's one of the great things about bringing the bids family together, because you can see that big picture context, you can understand the operating environment, you can shape the operating environment, particularly as we go into an election and the parties vying for support are looking for ideas, they're looking for support, and so being able to get them to adopt policies and drive them forward coming out of the election, whoever wins in May, getting them to adopt those policies to support the work which you do is absolutely crucial. It's as crucial now as it was back in 2006. Bids, almost uniquely, were born through an election period. So they began life with the old Labour Liberal executive, and they survived the switch of power to the SNP when they came in 2007. It was on a knife edge, Ian, wasn't it? But John Swinney, the Deputy First Minister, on that visit to Bathgate, he understood and appreciated the impact that public sector, private sector partnership was having, and it was adopted into government programme, and the rest, as they say, is history. So being able to attack that agenda, to plug in, to align with other aspects of government policy, whether it's the Community Empowerment and Renewal Bill, whether it's the focus on town centres, whether it's the focus on tourism, whether it's growing the economy, whether it's trying to make the economy more productive, being able to tap in to existing policy, to shape it, to adopt new policy is something which bids have been very good at over that 10 years, and I would hope you're going to continue to be very good at over at least the next 10. Thanks very much.